name is Bob Prescott. As some of you know, I recently retired as sanctuary director at Nassau Multi-Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, so he gave me a new title. I'm now sanctuary director emeritus, which means I can do a lot of the fun stuff that I used to do, and I don't have to go to as many meetings or do some of the stuff that isn't so much fun. So I actually get to spend more time studying and doing things in the field, which is pretty good. But I started studying sea turtles back in 1974 when I found my first sea turtle. And at that time we knew so little about them and what they were doing. And we've really come a long way in understanding the biology of sea turtles along the east coast of the United States and what they're doing here on Cape Cod. So that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. And when we talk about sea turtles on Cape Cod, there are 5 species altogether, but the 2 that we really deal with the most of is this larger species, which is the Loggerhead sea turtle, and they're just starting to strand right now. It's early to mid-December, and they start showing up. And this is actually kind of a smallish one, and they can range anywhere from 25. We actually had a couple of smaller ones this year, which are a little unusual. They can range anywhere from 25 to, we've had some in almost 300 pounds. But we've had a number around 150 to 100 to 150 pounds. So they range quite a bit in size and weight for one species. And the most common sea turtle strand is the Kemp's Ridley, the smallest and the most endangered of all the sea turtles in the world. And they show up here on our doorstep. We'll talk a little bit more about their biology and what they might be doing here, and you know, how many we're rescuing and what we go through to rescue them. So there's that. So there's a handout up in the back, and I'm a little embarrassed because it isn't something we ordinarily hand out, but I do want to hand out something about the species that are here. It is part of our fundraising. This is something that isn't funded by the government, it's really funded by our members, but the point is not that we have to contribute, it's just the information in here is developed by our development department, not by our biology department, our teachings. But I just want to make that clear. So can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Rather than use the microphone. So if you want to dim the lights, we'll go into the program. And we'll go through the program, and then we'll save the questions for the end. And I'm happy to sit here and talk about turtles for as long as you'd like. But it's really pretty remarkable. I don't have to tell a ton of people in here, but the way cameras, especially phones, and people had their tablets with them out on the water. We're just getting some extraordinary photographs of sea turtles on the water, because your chance of seeing one on the water is pretty remote, and they don't want to be seen really, so they often will just sort of dive away from you as quickly as they can. So it always amazes me that people get some really excellent photographs of the turtles, and I'm going to show you those. These are mostly taken by the various whale watch naturalists, both out at Stellwagen off of Provincetown, and then up on Jeffrey's Ledge off of the North Shore. So there's a couple of big whale watching areas, but that's also where a lot of the turtles will hang out. So this may be dim enough, but let's just see how it goes. Everyone see it all right? So as I mentioned, there's 5 species of sea turtles in Massachusetts. This particular one is a loggerhead sea turtle, and when they're photographed in the water, it's really hard to tell how large they are. There's really nothing to compare their size to. I would guess this is probably a 40 or 50 pound turtle. It also depends on what kind of summer they're having. They're here eating. A loggerhead can dive to 300 feet. So if they're out over Stellwagen, which is anywhere from 100 to 300 feet down, they can feed anywhere they want along the upper part and along the sides of Stellwagen banks. So they can be deep divers. But a lot of them, especially the Ridleys, like to come into the shallow water. That's a loggerhead. The biggest of all the sea turtles is the leatherback, and they're a kind of a different type of sea turtle. They're warm-blooded, unlike most of the others. They go through a regular annual migration through our waters. None of the other sea turtles that I'll show you come to our waters, especially Cape Cod Bay, on an annual migration. They come here for what we call a post-nesting dispersal, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the leatherback is actually a migrant from the tropics, and they spend the summer in the high Arctic, where they feed on jellyfish. And when you think about biology, most of the time we know that, or hear that reptiles are cold-blooded or ectothermic, but the leatherback is actually warm-blooded, and that's why you can go to the high Arctic, because it maintains a body temperature warmer than the surrounding waters. We mostly get adult leatherbacks, but we've been seeing over the last decade or so a number of juvenile leatherbacks, and they're about this big and weigh maybe 500 pounds. They're about 106 centimeters. Whereas some of the bigger ones can weigh up to 2,000 pounds. So they're quite a different animal. Green sea turtles, we get a number of juvenile green sea turtles here in Massachusetts. Maybe not so much in Cape Cod Bay, except during the cold sun season, but there are a number of reports of green sea turtles in our various embayments along the Nantucket Sound shoreline, especially down here, Falmouth, Mashpee, Tuit, in that area. There seem to be more greens there than almost anywhere else. And then hawksbills are the turtles they make tortoise shell from, and that's because of the nature of their shell. It's really very brilliantly colored and strikingly marked. And so there was a long historical market for them, and that's pretty much what caused their near extinction. And that's been banned throughout the world. There is still a slight harvest, but they're no longer harvesting. But because this is a coral reef turtle, we don't see this one here. We have maybe 5 specimens as records of hawksbills in Massachusetts waters. Then the loggerhead, again, mostly juveniles, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we've actually recovered 5 adult loggerhead, which is a little odd. We had 3 strand in Cape Cod Bay, and 2 were hit by ships or boat propellers in Cape Cod, in Nantucket Sound. So we're starting to see the occasional adult loggerhead, but again, mostly juveniles. And then, as you mentioned, the Kemp's Ridley, the most endangered species of sea turtle on Earth. Over 80% of the turtles recovered in any given year during the cold stunning period are the Kemp's Ridleys. For some reason, I'll explain, they really like our waters during the summer months. But for some reason, they fail to figure out winter, and then they don't get out of here in time. We'll talk a little bit about that also as we go through it. So when you think about sea turtles, there are really 2 different seasons. The sea turtles is another loggerhead. It's not uncommon to see these hitchhikers, if you will. These are turtle barnacles. There's usually a whole community of organisms that grow on the back of some of the sea turtles. We've collected as many as 15 different species of marine invertebrates living on the backs of sea turtles. But that's the loggerhead. And we usually think of sea turtles being here from May, June to October. That would be the summer season. But we seem to have a bit of an overlap now occurring in October, where there are still some leatherbacks lingering into October. And then in October, the cool sun season begins. And we've actually had sea turtle strand on in November. We had a live leatherback strand on First Encounter Beach last year. So there is a bit of an overlap, but think of the fall as the cold sun time, and the summer is when the turtles are here enjoying the warm waters around Cape Cod. So we have a website that collects information from boaters about the sea turtles that they're seeing offshore, and they report this information to us online or by phone or email, and we compile it, and then the map, we produce a map on a website that looks like this. And this goes back more than a decade now that we've been collecting this information. So the red dots are leatherbacks, and the blue are the loggerheads. And usually there are many more leatherbacks seen during the season. This is data collected opportunistically, meaning it's the boaters that are on the water that are reporting to us. So we can't really use this in any fashion to produce a population estimate, or well, we can use it a little bit for understanding where leatherbacks are. We can use it to tell us when they arrive and when they depart. But because the boating boating interests are scattered throughout, it looks like no one goes boating, say, out of Plymouth or Provincetown or Wellesley. But as you know, they do. There's lots of boat traffic and whale watch and all of that. But in reality, if you've been to Falmouth, especially the Vineyard, there's a lot more boats in that area. Plus, there's a lot more fishing. And this is one of the really major fishing areas: striped bass, bluefish. Fluke, there's a big fluke fishery. There's a shoal right where these dots are clustered. So we get a lot of reports from fishermen in that area. But you can see here's Block Island. There's a lot of leatherbacks around Block Island for some reason. There's always been a lot of boating going on there. And every year we get a report of, and multiple reports from boaters here between Tucker, Nantucket, and off of Waskee Shoals, another fishing area, as are the shoals off of South Monomoy down towards Great Point on Nantucket. So this shows you where leatherbacks have been seen, and gives you an idea. They're using all the waters around Massachusetts, and as I said, they're primarily feeding on the large lion's mane jellyfish that was here in our waters. So this is a live leatherback. They're quite different. They don't have these scales on the shell. Instead, they have these ridges. It almost looks like an upside down dinghy. It looks like a boat upside down, and that's often as people will tell us. They thought at first it was an upside down boat drifting, and it turned out to be just a leatherback sunning itself. They often come up to the surface on these sort of still days and just sort of float on the surface. They can breathe. Obviously, they need to come up for air. They're often diving into the colder bottom waters. They're moving through sometimes colder water patches, so they do need to sit out, even though they are somewhat warm-blooded. This is one of the deepest diving animals on Earth. They can dive down to 3,000 feet, which was completely unknown to science until they started putting transmitters on the back of the turtles, and the equipment was destroyed by the depth of the turtles, or the pressure of the depths these turtles were going to, so they had to completely redesign them. No one had any idea that they could go that deep. But they live in the world's ocean. There's a North Atlantic population, a South Atlantic population, and there's a population in the North and South Pacific. About the only population in the world, well, the Atlantic population, both in the North Atlantic and the South Atlantic, are doing fairly well. In the South Pacific, they mostly nest in Gabon, which is on the west coast of Africa, and in the North Atlantic, they nest in the southern part of the North Atlantic, mostly along the north coast of South America, Costa Rica, Panama, Trinidad and Tobago. We've actually had tagged turtles recover here in Massachusetts that have nested on St. Kitts, in the Caribbean, Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago, Puerto Rico. So these are all sort of tropical warm water nesting areas. Leatherbacks nest every year in some beaches and every other year in other parts of their range. Unfortunately, especially in Suriname and Guyana, they're actually mining the sand of the beaches because they need sand to make concrete to build the cities. And obviously, if they keep mining the sand, then there's no place for turtles to nest. So that's a big issue with turtles. Plus, we don't know what kind of mortality they're experiencing throughout their migration. I'll come back to that in a minute. Here's a loggerhead sea turtle sunning itself. Again, lots of turtle barnacles on the back. This is a pretty good size loggerhead, maybe about 100 pounds, 120 pounds, judging by the size of these barnacles. And then they have a big head. And they're primarily feeding on moon snails, whelks, lobsters, horseshoe crabs, any kind of crabs, spider crabs in particular. They eat rock crabs, they eat blue mussels. Whenever they eat shellfish, moon snails, whelks, mussels, they crush the shell and then it drops away. So if you've ever found one of those big conch or whelk shells on the beach, think of the power that it takes for that turtle to bite it and crush it, and then it have it fall away. And they eat hermit crabs too, but they crush the shell and just eat the soft-bodied hermit crab from inside. So when you look at a turtle skull, it looks pretty big, but it's all muscle. The brain of a 100-pound loggerhead is about the size of your thumb. So you don't need to be big brain to live 40 million years or migrate up and down the Atlantic. But in any case, they're coming up to our waters to feed because we have an abundance of marine invertebrates in Nantucket Sound, Buzzards Bay, and Vineyard Sound. So that's why the turtles are here. Loggerheads are the ones that we see most frequently. Because of their size, largely, but you can see it. And so during the summer months, you keep track of how many live sightings of loggerheads are coming in. We're still trying to figure out how can we predict the number of coal-stunned turtles we're going to get in any one year, just to be prepared to deal with all eventualities. And we still have not found that mechanism that allows us to predict with any degree of certainty what kind of year we're going to have. So you can see it's sort of all over the place with loggerheads. Our biggest year ever was 2014 when we had 1,240 sea turtles wash in. We had another really big year in 1999. We had 178 loggerheads. Mostly we were averaging around 30 or 40 loggerheads a year. So there's something else going on as to why some years we have a lot of turtles and other years we don't. And we're not really that close. Well, we're a little bit closer to understanding it, but I'm not sure we're going to have the predictive ability that some people would like. It's another loggerhead. And then the Ridley is the smallest of all the sea turtles. It probably has traveled the furthest of any of the sea turtles. I'll show you where they nest and how they get here. To me, it's always amazing to see a Ridley. You saw the size of the shell. And you can imagine being out on the Stellwagen or out on a whale watching trip or out, to the east of the Cape fishing. And all of a sudden you look down and there's a dinner plate-sized turtle swimming along. And will sun themselves, but still, when they hear or see a boat, they're startled by that, and they quickly dive down and they're gone. It's pretty hard to see them. But they do show up. And this one was actually found on Skakit Beach in Orleans by one of our researchers who was out looking for some horseshoe crab nursery areas. We're trying to understand where, we know where horseshoe crabs spawn, but we're not really sure, especially around the shores of Cape Cod Bay, where do the juvenile horseshoe crabs grow up, and they need a very specific type of bottom. And he was out looking for some of these places on the tidal flats. And the tide had gone all the way out, but it left the tide pools, and in one of the tide pools was this Ridley. This was in September. We don't have very many records of live Ridley records. We haven't caught that many live Ridleys in the summer, so we don't actually know what a healthy Ridley looks like. But we did grab this one, and it went up to New England Aquarium where they drew blood, and it was released the next day. It was a perfectly healthy turtle. But we released it in Nantucket Sound. We didn't let it go back in Cape Cod Bay. We're just not sure whether it would ever find its way out or not. So it got moved. We also look at dead turtles, and the boaters are really pretty good at sending us pictures and asking about the dead turtles that are out there floating around, which in some cases we never get to see. They never come ashore. So if they don't come ashore, how do we count them? How do we report them to, mostly to NOAA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who are responsible for protecting these turtles and coming up with population estimates. So leatherbacks in particular can disintegrate. A leatherback that weighs 1,000 pounds, probably in August, would disintegrate in 10 days. So if we don't get any strong winds, there's nothing that's going to blow that turtle ashore, and we're just not going to ever know that it died here while it visited. So in the summer of 2018, we actually had 17 leatherbacks reported by boaters that never came ashore. And those were 17 different leatherbacks. We actually had people report individual dead ones multiple times. We could actually follow where it was drifting to, but the wind never came up, and the turtle didn't wash ashore, and it just slowly disintegrated. It's less likely with loggerheads. They seem to hold together a little bit better. but still they often wash ashore. So we're collecting information about dead ones. We, for every live one that does come ashore, we do a necropsy. That's an animal autopsy. We do it on the beach. So this was at Harding's Beach in Chatham. And Harding's Beach in Chatham, although we didn't have one there this year, but almost every year there's a dead sea turtle that washes up on Harding's Beach in Chatham, which is one of the easternmost beaches in Chatham, and a lot of things accumulate there. And this turtle had actually been entangled. You can see where the line had wrapped around its left front flipper, right over the shoulder area, and the line abraded into the skin, below the skin, and it probably got infected, and that infection is what killed the turtle. You can see on that either line or the buoy went over the carapace, over the shell, and eroded the skin, and that's eroded down to the bone. Some turtles are more sensitive to entanglement than others. We've actually seen live leatherbacks whose limbs, the front limbs, have been amputated by line, with entangled, and the line wore right through it, and the turtle lived, and it's all healed over. So it's again, different turtles can tolerate different things. We're finding that entanglement is a big issue for turtles, leatherbacks in particular. This was a loggerhead this past summer in Harwichport. It was kind of interesting because there was actually a cocktail party going on up on the top of the bluff when I went down there to do the necropsy on this. So I'm always sort of a little leery about doing necropsies. This was a pretty bloated turtle, meaning it was pretty smelly. But I did the autopsy, and I could hear people going, "What's he doing there?" But no one came down to see, and I quickly buried it and it was gone. But another big loggerhead, no sign of entanglement. What was interesting is that the lungs were full of water and the stomach was full of food, the stomach and intestine. And usually what that means was a very traumatic injury, and death was very rapid. But there was no sign of a boat strike, there was no sign of entanglement. So it was kind of we just really weren't sure what had killed this particular turtle. So these are baby turtles. We're not even sure how old this one is. It might be 4 or 5, 6 years old. We're just doing some studies with NOAA to determine the age of loggerheads. But so that's a baby turtle. So why are turtles here? As I said, I found my first turtle in 1974 and took it around to various biologists and went to turtle conferences and presented information about sea turtles. And everyone thought in the late 1970s, everybody thought that any turtles in Massachusetts were considered turtles that were lost to the population. That they just go out of places, sort of like birds that go where they're not normally found, but they probably never get back home, or they're not part of the breeding population. And so people used to think, well, the turtles that were here in Massachusetts were just lost. And there are specimens around at the different museum collections. But then I found more turtles in 75, more turtles in 76, always in September, October, early November. And so when things start happening on a regular pattern, that's not an accident. Something else is going on. And so we started studying more and more about it, collecting more and more information from people. So by the 1980s, we had a pretty good idea that this was part of some regular event that was connected to the turtle's natural history. And everyone sort of started to get on this idea that turtles actually have a couple of different things, the life stages that they go through that I'll explain in a minute. Ridley is probably the one that follows that life schedule more closely than, say, a loggerhead. But we mostly hear and see about turtles on tropical nesting beaches, subtropical nesting beaches. Loggerheads will nest as far north as Virginia. But mostly that everyone is focusing on turtles that are nesting on the beaches. The males hang around offshore to mate with the females. They come ashore. Some nest every year, some every other year. And then we've all seen pictures of the hatchlings scrambling to the water. Here on the East Coast, loggerheads and ridleys mostly hatch at night, and that's to avoid the bird predators. Most of the turtles that hatch during the day are in areas where there aren't very many bird predators. It's better to hatch at night, so you avoid that predation. But this stage, when right after they hatch, they swim like crazy as fast as they possibly can to get out into the drifting seaweed patches that are out in the ocean, and they float around. And so this is called the benthic or pelagic post-nesting dispersal. meaning they swim as fast as they can, they get into the seaweed, and they're going to live there. As I said, the lost year, and it's really lost years where they're so small no one can even find them. And then once you start to find them, they're still way out at sea in these drifting seaweed patches. But then at some point, they get too big to be drifters. They get too big to be pelagic, meaning oceanic. They start to stick out too much. They become more of a target for tiger sharks and other ocean predators. And so then they swim west towards land, which brings them to the east coast of the United States. And there they become bottom-dwelling benthic animals. Once they change out of this pelagic stage and become bottom-feeding, bottom-living sea turtles, loggerheads and ridleys, then they go through an annual migration up and down the east coast until they reach maturity. And then once they mature, they never migrate again. They sort of wander around a little bit, off the coast of Florida, if that's where they nest, or the Carolinas. So it's 3 different phases: this juvenile post-nesting dispersal, subadult annual migration, and then adults. They have a permanent address and don't go anywhere. So, the northern limit is somewhere up in here, but we now know they go up into Canada, and some of the turtles actually cross the Atlantic. But all the ridleys start here at Rancho Nuevo. 90% of the world population of ridley sea turtles nest at Rancho Nuevo in Mexico. There's a smaller subpopulation now at Party Island National Seashore. And so there's 2 major gyres, or ocean currents, that ridleys live in. There's this one south of Rancho, and then there's the northern Gulf. And they're in this, drifting seaweed. That's where they live. And as you may remember, maybe you weren't aware, that when the oil well blew out in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, they were burning off all the seaweed patches because that's where the oil was getting stuck. And at that time, they were then killing the next generation of turtles when they were burning those patches. And the ridley population took a major crash after 2010. It went from 25,000 nesting turtles to less than 10, and it dropped down to 8, and now it's starting to come back again. But the ridleys get into this little loop current over here somehow, we don't know how, into the Florida current and up the east coast. So somewhere around in here, they're finally big enough where they can't really live in the seaweed patches or in the Gulf Stream, and they swim west. If they swim west, south of the Cape, everything is good, because it's all nice warm water, and they'd be up and down here, and it's their annual migration for as long as they like. Loggerheads will do that, but also loggerheads can go across the Atlantic, go into the Mediterranean, spend 6, 7, 8 years in the Mediterranean, and then come around and come back into the United States water down to the Caribbean. They may take them 30 years to do that, and that's how long it takes a loggerhead to reach maturity. Ridleys mature in about 10 or 12 years, but loggerheads take a little bit longer. But in any case, right now, as some of you know, the Gulf of Maine is the warmest warming body of water on Earth. And so that started in after the El Nino years in the late 1990s, and really hit the peak in 2012. Last summer, I think, was the 2nd warmest year ever, with almost a water temperature almost 70 degrees in the Gulf of Maine. So when you look back at the water temperatures in the 90s and earlier, it almost always looks like this: blue being cold water. I always remember that, because if you go swimming in Maine, your lips are blue because the water's so cold. You really can't swim there. You can now, because look what it looks like. It's no different than Nauset Beach, New Orleans now. But you can see Nauset, you never used to really be able to swim in Nauset. It was way too cold. Now it's not. And now it used to be cold all the way around, and it's not. So when a turtle came up, and it had to swim west to get into the bottom, onto this shallow water and new feeding areas, they would hit this and they go, oh, it's way too cold. Turtles are very temperature driven. They want to go wherever the water is the warmest. And they're not going to go up. They didn't go up in here. But after the El Nino years, the turtles just went right in. So the food that's available for them in Long Island Sound and Nantucket Sound is also available for them in Cape Cod Bay, Boston Harbor, all along the coast of Maine. So they don't know that winter's coming. They have no idea, that they can't figure their way out of there. Instead, they're just seeing all the food, and they just eat all summer. Life is good because there's plenty to eat. But they don't realize that this geologic accident that is Cape Cod, that was here when sea level rose to when it formed when sea level rose to its current elevation, 10, 12,000 years ago, and it'll disappear in 10 or 12,000 years. Keep in mind that Ridley is 40 million years old. It's gone through the glaciers and all, climate change and all of that. And so something like this accident isn't going to really bother them too much. So we always look at the weather. I mean, the technology is so terrific. We can go online and see what the water temperatures are like, on a regular basis. So, this made us very nervous. In 2014, we had such a warm year. That was our biggest year. And then look at this year, it was even warmer. And we thought for sure we were going to have a lot of turtle stranding because it was so warm in our waters. But in reality, again, warm, but by September, over a month later, all that warmth had disappeared. We thought, well, maybe the turtles got out because it's getting cooler and they're realizing things are changing. So we didn't know that. One of the other projects that we started a number of years ago was this drifter project. And these are former Nauset High School students, and Nauset High School, when we asked, could you help us with this drifter project for extra credit after hours, I think 7 or 8 students came forward, and this is the first year that they've made these drifters for us. And we went out on boats and we let them go. And there's a GPS unit up here, and this is the float, and the floats, this is above water, but all this is below water. And what it's telling us is about the motion of water and wind and where turtles are. And then when they wash in, unfortunately, this is what they look like. So they get beat up pretty badly. You can imagine, though, a turtle has gone through the same thing. So early on, the drifters actually tell us, where turtles might come in. And, these are their landing points. They were usually released out here. And you can see that there's a big area out in this area where there's almost no current. So we think a lot of the turtles are right there. And then we also discovered a mechanism that the turtles, even if they're semi-active or maybe even passive, there's a combination of winds that can actually get them out around Race Point and out into the Atlantic, where they would drift south and warm up and recover from the cold in our water. So, Nauset was the first year, helped us, and has been part of the project ever since. And the same is true with Monterey High School is helping us too. And now we have 3 different kinds of drifters. We have what we call a standard drifter. We have what we call a drogue that is in the middle of the water, maybe 20 feet down. And then we have a model of a turtle that we actually sinks to the bottom, but the GPS unit and float is at the surface. So by combining all of these things, we may come up with a better way to predict where turtles are going to come ashore. Now this project is being run by a PhD candidate at the University of Rhode Island. So it's a very interesting study. So now, this time of year, usually starting in mid to late October, we get into the cold sun season. We have a Ridley coming in here. There's a Loggerhead, and unfortunately, you can see the ice on the bay. We had a lot of turtles die when the ice starts to form. And what's really kind of funny, I'm a summer kid that never left. And we used to come down on holidays and school vacations, and we spent every other Thanksgiving here. And one of the things that always fascinated me is going over to Skate Beach during Thanksgiving and seeing ice. And that by Christmas, you couldn't see open water at Skate. So think about it now. When was the last time anyone really saw ice in Cape Cod Bay? It just doesn't freeze over anymore like it used to. And that's what often catches the turtles off guard, is the ice. So the mechanism that we've discovered in the cold stunning always seems to start when the water temperature is around 50. It can be 52, but almost always it's around 50. It takes a west wind, a really strong west wind, when these cold fronts start coming through. That's when the turtles start washing up. So if the wind is blowing from a westerly direction across Cape Cod Bay and blowing ashore here around the bay, then on a west wind we get turtles in Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham. If the wind is northwest, out of this direction, west-northwest, then again, it's Wellfleet, Eastham, Orleans, maybe a little bit of Brewster. The wind is more north-northwest, then it's Brewster and Orleans. And when the wind is northeast, like it was twice this stranding season, then the turtles come up in Barnstable at Sandy Neck, and then in Sandwich up to the canal. This year we actually had, because we had a few easterly winds, easterly gales, we had a turtle at Scuffet, we had a turtle in Plymouth, and we had a turtle in Duxbury, which is a little unusual. But that's what the wind is doing. So that's what we pieced together starting from the early days of the stranding season. And when we show people, especially when I do this program for people in the summertime, and I say, what shore is this? And they always say, it's the Atlantic. But this is actually a beach in Dennis. During the stranding period, this is when we send our volunteers out, when the wind is 20 miles an hour or greater, and the air temperature is often 30 degrees, and we'll walk miles of beach, looking for these turtles that are washing up on the shore. So this is over near Corporation Beach in Dennis, and the surf is about 3 or 4 feet in the bay. Everyone thinks that's the Atlantic Ocean, for sure. And then the waves just literally wash the turtle up. You'll be walking along, and you'll see nothing, and all of a sudden the wave washes up, and when it goes out, there's a turtle. And this is a Ridley that particularly happens to Ridleys. Loggerheads, it takes a little bit more wave energy because they're a bigger, much bigger turtle, but that's a Ridley. Here's one of the 3 adult loggerheads that washed ashore in Cape Cod Bay. This was at First Encounter Beach in 2014. This was the 3rd largest female loggerhead ever to wash ashore in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, she died. We were able to save 2 of the other mature loggerheads that stranded on Cape Cod. One of them was actually tagged on Balkan Island, where it nested every year. They had seen it. They tagged her in 1988, and she washed ashore in Cape Cod Bay in 1999. So in a big turtle year, we actually go out in a boat out of Sassuat Harbor, in Albatross, our staff and volunteers, and we go out on the bay when you can see it's kind of flat and not very much wind. And we're looking, and this is usually in October. The turtles are kind of stuck. They're trying to find a warm place, and so if it's somewhat of a semi-warm day and the sun is out, the turtles will actually float right on the surface. And so we're out looking for them. Actually, this year we're flying a drone from the boat to see if we can increase our search pattern. And in 2018, we caught 4 turtles. In 2012, we caught 8 turtles. This year when we were out, we didn't catch any. It may be because there just weren't that many out there, or we didn't hit the right day. That you can see it would be really hard to find a turtle that size when you're out on the water in a boat. And this is the opening day, the first day of stranding season last year, 2018. This is the first shipment of turtles that our volunteers found on the Brewster beaches that morning. The wind was really howling, and the turtles were washing ashore. They started picking up turtles at Breakwater Beach in Brewster and went all the way to Crosby. And they brought this group of turtles in. We had another volunteer, or our staff were next, and they had a similar van, and they brought in this many turtles. So on really cold years, we may get as many as 30 to 100 turtles each tide during those wind episodes. During 2012, we were getting 200 turtles on every tide. There's that many turtles out there. Unfortunately, if you remember last year, 2018, what Thanksgiving was like, it was the coldest Thanksgiving in 10 years. And this is what happened. All these turtles came up on the wrong day. They didn't have a choice. They got blown ashore on the coldest day of the year, the coldest day of the fall, and these are all frozen, and they're all dead. These are all Ridleys, and that's one Nisi turtle right in the middle. So we had over 200 turtles die during that Thanksgiving period because it was so cold. And then, 4 days after Thanksgiving, we had another wind episode, and the turtles were alive. So it isn't in the deep bay that they have the problem. It's on those tidal flats when they get blown ashore. That's where they're freezing. And then whenever there are turtles, they're often way down the end of the beach. This is Great Island in Wellfleet. That's about a 100-pound loggerhead to drag them back because you can't get vehicles out there at the tide. We need to get them off the beach quickly. We also have several different designs on turtle carts that we're literally towing and rolling the turtles on and off the beach to get them back and start healing. Our role in this is to process the turtles, do initial health assessment see what's going on with them, alert the aquarium to any injuries or significant wounds or any debilitation that we see in the turtles. We use banana boxes for Ridleys and green sea turtles. It's a perfect carrying container for them, and we've done this for decades. So each box has a turtle in them. We can put 9 banana boxes with turtles in a Prius. And then on busy days, we need our volunteers to have minivans. And then, unfortunately, loggerheads are a bit rambunctious, quite a bit bigger. They need a vehicle of their own. So we can often put 2 in a vehicle, but even with 2, I don't know whether they're communicating, I'm just kidding, that they always get into trouble. If you have just one, they usually behave themselves till they get to Quincy, to the rehab facility. But you put in 2 and they start wrestling in the bathroom. It's weird. But loggerheads are kind of fun to work with, but they're big turtles. They're really hard to manage, and it takes a couple of people to handle them. So this is turtles by species. As I mentioned, more than 80% are Ridleys. This goes back to the very beginning, back to the 70s. If we look at this over the last decade, these are almost even. That is, there are almost as many green sea turtles stranding on Cape Cod as there are loggerheads. And that's because during the 1970s, there were no green sea turtles nesting in Florida. But because of all the conservation laws, dim your lights or turn off your lights in Florida, green sea turtle, there are now 28,000 green sea turtle nests in Florida that weren't there. So this is something we battle all the time. And everyone is complaining about conservation laws. Well, conservation laws work. We would not have the Ridley here today. That might have been the last Ridley sea turtle we found in 1974 if we didn't have the Endangered Species Act to protect it. All the research that went into it, all the protections, and because they were being drowned in shrimp nets, the bottom habitat was being destroyed, the turtles were being eaten. We would have lost the Ridley by now. And loggerheads, the same thing was true in Florida. They would be building bulkheads and seawalls and lights and condos, and there would be no conservation land where the turtles could nest. So conservation does work, and the sea turtles prove that, because nowhere else in the world are sea turtles doing as well as they're doing along the east coast of the United States. And then as far as where they strand, these are the 2 ends of the world, Provincetown and Sandwich. And then this is sort of a mixed bag depending on how the wind is blowing. So this year, I think we've only had 4 turtles in Turtle because the wind has just not been west enough. And then Whelpley hasn't, I think Whelpley maybe only has, well, I think, here it is. So 2 turtles. I think over the last couple of days we picked up a couple more loggerheads. This is as of the 9th when I put this together. But you see not very many turtles in Turtle and Whelpley, and then you look at Dennis and Barnstable and Sandwich. So that indicates it's been a kind of an easterly wind, northeasterly wind fall for these turtles. And then these are the stranding records over the years. Not very many. We used to have a lot of turtles that stranded in Long Island Sound. And so back in the 80s, they would get 100 and we would get 20. And you can see it sort of going along. But after 1995, it sort of flipped. And we started getting the hundreds, and they started getting the 20 or 30 for the most part. And so it's been up and down, and 178. I hope we never see more than that. And then 1999, 323. And then it drops back down. So it's sort of up and down, but you can see overall it's an upward trend. And then our big year, and then down, and then last year. So this year we would expect it to go down. It almost always goes down right after a big year. And then it will pick up again at some point. Is it going to be 10 years or is it going to be 5 years? We don't know. And we'd like to get some predictability into this, but I'm not sure we're ever going to get to that point. So we just assumed that we're going to get 1,000 turtles stranding every single year. So we hire staff, we recruit volunteers, we get all of their gear together, and we plan for 1,000 turtles. And hope we don't get them, or hope they come in early and we can rescue them all, because once the turtles go to the aquarium, then they have to get flown out to other parts of other aquariums along the East Coast before they're finally released. So it's a big, big project. It's largely driven by volunteers and helped by volunteers. It's all private money. It's not federal dollars. It's private foundations and individual donors. So we do get a number of dead ones every year, and every year when we in the winter, usually January, February, or March, for all 3 months, we go down to Woods Hole and use the necropsy lab in Woods Hole, and we do necropsy, which is an animal autopsy, we do a necropsy of all the dead turtles, and we learn a lot of different things. One, the only way you can tell a male or female turtle is by doing a necropsy and looking inside. And it was just long suspected that it's not a 50-50 mix of male and female turtles. It's actually more female turtles than males. I don't think it's skewed quite as high as this data is showing. You can see we didn't have, that was early on, we didn't have a big sample size. But with the Ridleys and Loggerheads too, they show about 65% of the turtles we see are females, and that probably means that's what the population is like. We're also now finding a lot of plastic inside turtles, and I'm sure this turtle didn't eat a lobster, but it swallowed the bands somewhere, picked up these bands, which it would be impossible for the turtle to digest them, and there's no way that these would get excreted. This tag from the bottom, the code from this navel orange would have just been passed by the turtle, as with these bits of plastic. That wouldn't bother a turtle too much. We don't know what the digestive juices on plastic is doing to the turtle, but in any case, we do know that they're picking up more and more plastic, and we're expanding our sea turtle necropsies that we do with NOSIP and Monomoy high schools to start looking at macro and microplastics now in turtles to help us learn a little bit more about the environment of the turtles have. And then the big deal is always releasing them. It's always a fun day when these turtles come into rehab. You can see they clean up pretty nicely. They lose a lot of the epibionts and then they're released. And sometimes the aquarium will put a satellite tag on a loggerhead to tell us where they're going. So last year they were released in early July, and they really like the Centerville, Osterville, Hyannis area. There seems to be a lot of rocks, eelgrass and sand bottom in this area, so there's a great diversity of food for them. But they move around quite a bit, but a lot of times they'll settle in there. As you can see from this particular turtle, really spent a number of months in Nantucket Sound, but eventually it left and went down off of New Jersey, and then ultimately continued on down to the Carolinas, where it stayed. It didn't come back. It just stayed down here, which is probably where it was born, and just stayed in that area. And then unfortunately the transmitter died, because they just don't see the last. Having one last over 400 days is pretty much a record for these satellite transmitters, unfortunately. And then here's just a breakdown of over the years all the dead and alive turtles. And it's just it's a pretty grim reminder of how many are out there and how quirky nature is. This isn't something we do. It's just they're here in the bay, and we have the ability to save them. They're all either threatened or endangered, so we can have a big impact on their lives. So it's a big effort, but it's worth the effort. And then as of the 11th, these are the totals for this year so far. And I know since I put this together, we've had 3 more loggerheads and 2 more Ridleys. The Ridleys came in dead, but the loggerheads were alive. And then just sort of maybe an interest to biologists are these hybrids that all 4 of the hardshell turtle, hawksbill green, loggerhead, and Ridley will interbreed. It's very rare, but they're kind of interesting to see. The shell looks a little different. You'll look at it and you'll say, oh, that's a loggerhead, or somebody else might look at it and say, oh, that's a Ridley, and you know that it's probably a hybrid. So that's what we had this year were 2 Ridley loggerhead hybrids, but we've had Ridley green, loggerhead hawksbill over the years. So just in conclusion, it takes a lot of people to make this whole rescue effort work. It's a lot of people involved in sharing this information with the public, because most people are totally shocked to hear that we have sea turtles here in the Northeast. And if you don't know something's here, or there's no way enough to protect it or take an interest in that particular species. So everybody has been really involved in the work that we've been doing in helping us with all the rescue efforts. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So I know that like a lot of cold sun come in every year. Is there tag them?
So every turtle that's rehabilitated is tagged. It's tagged with a metal tag on its flipper, usually on both front flippers. So you go by looking at it that it was a turtle that somebody had caught and maybe rehabilitated or measured or did something to. But they also put a pit tag, I mean, like a dog or a cat chip. And they put that over the right shoulder. And that's been going on now for close to a decade where we've been chipping the released sea turtles. So sea turtles, we don't put the chips in. The chips aren't put, or they're not tagged until they're actually released. So if the New England Aquarium is releasing them, we release them in West Dennis, usually in July. And if they're going to be released in West Dennis, the aquarium will put the tags on like the day before, 2 days before, and then put a chip in the turtle. And then it's released here. But if the turtle goes from the aquarium, say, to the North Carolina aquarium, then the North Carolina veterinarians put the tags and the chips on the turtle. So one of the big questions we had right from the very beginning was, do these turtles come back? You know, because we're putting them back out there. Is this some genetic deficiency they have, and they're always going to come back? But as I was describing it, this is a one-time post-nesting dispersal. So in theory, they don't come back. In theory, because this year we've had 4 come back. You know, last year we had 818 turtles. They get sent out all along the East Coast. So right now I think we know where 3 of them came from, where they were released. Last year we know 1 came from a released turtle from West Dennis. So here's a turtle that gets released from West Dennis in July. It's great. They're eating and feeding in Nantucket Sound, and they're heading down the Sound towards Martha's Vineyard, Falmouth, and then they make a right-hand turn into Buzzards Bay. Why? And then what makes them go through the canal? You know, and then they're in Cape Cod Bay again, and then they can't figure it out. So we actually had a satellite tag green sea turtle that we released in West Dennis, and it went back into Cape Cod Bay. It's got a satellite tag on it. We still couldn't find it because there's a delay in the satellite and where the turtle is by a day or so. So we were always a day behind it. We could never find it. But the Cape is, because of its glacial origin, and there's a lot of magnetite and hematite iron in the sand, there's no animal that navigates by sensing the electromagnetic field in the earth. They don't know where north is. They're totally sort of baffled by where they are. It's like not having a compass. And so they're in Cape Cod Bay with no compass. You know, there's Whelping Harbor is sort of a trap, and then Provincetown is sort of a trap, and they can never figure their way out in time. So when we see the tracks of some of the turtles, even leatherbacks and certainly that green sea turtle, it's just sort of ambling around. It can't figure its way out, just like dolphins and porpoises can't find their way out either. The other 3 turtles that we recovered that were tagged last year, one was released in North Carolina. They took it out to the Gulf Stream, or near the Gulf Stream, and put it in the water. And then the other one was released off of the Florida coast. It went to Epcot, and then they released it off of, I think, somewhere near Cape Canaveral. But the Gulf Stream in Florida, you can almost see it from there. And so the turtle probably swam straight away, got caught up in it, and it's back here. But the other one that's really interesting is last year the turtle was rehabilitated at the Woods Hole Aquarium in Falmouth. They took that turtle to Martha's Vineyard and let it go this last summer. And it went right up Buzzards Bay and back into Cape Cod Bay. So we're now saying you probably shouldn't let any turtles go here. You know, that even as a small subset of them never figure it out, we just shouldn't let them go here in the north. And we should let them all go south. And then there's another group of people that say, no, they should all be let go back in the Gulf of Mexico, especially Ridley's, because that's where they want to be. So we've had 1 green sea turtle come back, 1 loggerhead, and maybe 6 or 8 Ridleys. We're in the process of going back through our data. Probably going to write a paper about these turtles that are being released and getting confused and then coming back to restrand in the cold water. But that's a great question. I mean, that's one of the fundamental questions. You don't want to make things worse by putting the animals back into the environment. And, it's causing them some confusion.
So genetically, it doesn't seem that there are any like predispositions to getting stuck. It's just
no. I just think it's an age thing, that these are turtles that are still part of that post-nesting dispersal. They're not sub-adults yet, and so they haven't settled in along the East Coast. And so I think they're just still sort of figuring things out. You know, the turtle that I showed you, I think 10 years ago, we would have said that for sure was a 2-year-old turtle. But over the last decade, we've been taking the humerus, the arm bone of the turtles, and there's a woman who works for NOAA that's actually been looking at the cartilage on the humerus and sectioning it. You can actually count the growth ring. So as that turtle ages, it adds a growth ring on its cartilage on the humerus. So a turtle that size can be anywhere from 1.5 years old to 7. So the turtles that we release in West Dennis or the Vineyard or anywhere, that's still a juvenile turtle. And it's still thinking, you know, drifting or sargasso seaweed. It's not thinking, I really need to live on the bottom. So we're not sure at what age and where we should be letting them go. So that's sort of our next investigation. That's really a key question. But the bottom line is, we're saving, let's say, 80% of the turtles that we recover. So if there's 5 of them, and that's not even, that wouldn't even, you know, so yeah, say 5 turtles a year get confused and come back. There's still a whole lot of other turtles that, you know, go back to a normal life. And, you know, I guess it's just something we have to accept, but not really accept it yet until we understand it a little bit better. Yeah.
How can one get like involved with like the volunteer aspect, or how does that whole?
Sure. So every fall, usually the end of September and into October, we do training workshops at the sanctuary. There's usually one during the week in the afternoon, or 2 during the week in the afternoon, and then one on a Saturday. And anybody that wants to be involved can come by, sit through the workshop, and understand exactly what we're looking for. So we have people that are driving turtles to Quincy. We have people walking beaches. We have groups that are helping to put out drifters, go out and find drifters. We have a gang of people that make sure we have banana boxes. They go around to the different stores, especially off-Cape. We have usually one volunteer that does like the Stop and Shop in Orleans and the Shaws in Orleans, so that they're not inundated with lots of people going in. We've organized the local. But in big years, we've had to go off-Cape to get banana boxes, just so that we have enough of them. And so a lot of our off-Cape members and volunteers will call and say, I'm coming down for the weekend, how can I help? And we usually need towels, because we are shipping turtles on towels, so we need a lot of towels. And they'll often go to their local store and get banana boxes for us from off-Cape and bring them down, so we have them. So it's a pretty, we have about 250 people that are involved in the sea turtle work in some aspect, either walking beaches or helping with special ops, or driving turtles to Quincy. We drive the turtles to Quincy twice a day, usually once at 9 o'clock in the morning and again at 2. But if it's a big stranding and we have 30 turtles, then we do 10 turtles a shipment. So we'll do a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and an 11 o'clock trip to Quincy, rather than putting all 30 on one vehicle. And that spreads it out, so as they get into the aquarium facility in Quincy, the turtles are processed, then the next batch comes in and they process those. And we can go on. Well, thanks very much.